afternoon, everyone. I see you're already having a good evening. Are you having a good evening? All right. So, when Patrice gets ready, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heidi Holder. I'm the Frederick P. Rose and Sandra P. Rose Chair of Education at the Met, and I am delighted to welcome you to, and I realize some people were surprised. They didn't know what this place was because we've forgotten. This is the 81st Street Studio. And here tonight to celebrate and this year's Iris and B. Gerald Cantor Roof Garden Commission, Abatare, by Pritchett Halilai. Thank you for joining us tonight at the studio. And I just wanted to say a little bit about the space because you want to know how do we connect to Petrit. As you can already see the playfulness and everything is happening. We opened this space almost a year ago, just turned 1 year. And it's a free hands-on play space for children ages 3 to 11. And tonight, in the spirit of this space of experimentation, of play, of everything, we are really happy to host our first public program in this space. So this is an inaugural moment here in this space. So make yourself comfortable, and thank you for joining us on this adventure. Now, tonight we welcome Kosovar artist Petrit Halilai. His work claims space for art, freedom, intimacy, identity, while expressing his wish to alter the course of personal and collective histories. Pritchett developed Abatare, a complex, site-specific, outdoor, immersive installation for the Met that reflects on his experience as a refugee and explores the intersection of reality and fantasy through the rich world of children's drawings. Halilai's work is inspired by found inscriptions, carvings, scribbles, collected from desks at his former primary school and other Eastern European schools, a record of young people's fantasies, fears, and private messages conveyed in many languages. Now, in a moment, I'm going to turn you over to Iria Candela, the curator of Latin American art in the Department of Modern and Contemporary Art. But she's the curator who's joined Petrit on stage. And I wanted to shout out someone who's not here yet, which is Omari Jackson. His teachers are here. Omari Jackson is a 6-year-old artist who wanted to meet Petrit very badly, and I can tell you why. He has never seen Abatare, but he came and his work is exhibited out there. It's called Timothy the Spider, and it looks exactly like the spider on the roof. It was unbelievable. So I feel Omari made a collage of a spider. It's called Timothy the Spider. That though thousands of miles away from the desks in Eastern Europe and many, many years removed, looks very much like the spider. And I wonder if it says something about how children make marks, which is something that you do explore. What is mark making like for children? So when Omari comes, it's up to you what you want to do. I want to just shout out his teachers in the front where you can just wave to the people, right? Because every artist starts as a young artist. Omari is 6 years old, and you know how important this is. Now, Petrit, we are really, really honored to have you with us tonight, and I cannot say more than welcoming you, but I must speak about our sponsors because that's how things get done in this world. So an installation of this scale would not be possible without our wonderful sponsors. And I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Bloomberg Philanthropy's extraordinary generosity. Additional support is provided by the Diane W. and James E. Burke Fund, Cinta Hazen Polsky and Leon B. Polsky, and the Edward, John, and Patricia Rosenwald Foundation. And without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Iria Candela and Pritchett Halilai to what we call not the stage, but Storytime Hill and the 81st Street Studio. Welcome them.
Sorry. There you go. Thank you, Heidi, so much for the introduction. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the 81st Street Studio. As you know, this is a very special place for children. I hope they don't get mad at us for hosting this event tonight, which is an adult program, the first time conducted in this space. 81st Street Studio is committed to inviting kids of all ages to explore, to learn, to experiment, and of course, to come to a museum and to learn about art and to learn to appreciate art. And we are very privileged today to have an artist, Petrit Halilai, coming from Berlin, where he lives and works, to tell us more and all the thoughts and ideas behind his current project in the Met Roof, titled Abatare. His story is very much rooted in the story of a childhood. It's a very special story of childhood, and that he will share with us. And just to say or kind of introduce you, he's an artist that was already very well known in Europe. He's still young, but he did already he did already many shows there. But this was basically the very first time he's doing a major project in the US. It was also the first for him in achieving or approaching a public outdoor space, and it was very special also for that reason. And all of that we're going to try to, come up and explain in the course of this talk. And recently also, last year, he had a mid-career survey at the Museo Tamayo in Mexico. It's important to say how come an artist of this young age is already having like a mid-career survey, going through his previous works. And then also he receiving like a status of a sort of a stardom of sorts. Excuse me, there you go. This exhibition in Tamayo included an intervention, somehow a public art intervention with the flight company Aeromexico, in which he painted a chicken on one of those planes. And chickens are actually a very important part of Patrice's life and work. We'll also tell you more about it later. I keep going back. This is a bit hard to move. Excuse me. But somehow coming forward, we couldn't do it without actually going back to the origins of Patrice as an artist. And we feel important also in the context of the 81st Street Studio, this place that showcases, the experiences and creativity of children, to go back to Patrice's own growing up as a child. And that completely marked his life and his trajectory and made him the artist he is today. So this slide shows him as a boy with 13 years old. In Kosovo, as many of you might know, it has a very particular story. In the late 80s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Yugoslavia started to break down as a country. There were many conflicts, internal wars, the last of which was the war in Kosovo that took place between 1998 and 1999. And that affected and marked the life of Patrice and his family. At that time, Serbian forces expelled up to 1 million Albanians out of the territory. And Patrice and his family, along many other friends, ended up in a refugee camp in Kukes. His home, family home in Runik, was destroyed. So this image you're seeing is Patrice already in the refugee camp, and something there happened that would change his life. He was part of workshops that were being conducted in these camps by psychologists to just help children just channel these recent experiences of loss, trauma, and so forth. And Patrice started out already as a child prodigy of sorts, because he was able to draw with both his hands at the same time. He always liked to draw two different pictures that would somehow be opposed. And he already been, drawing at home, right, as a child with the encouragement of her mother, his mother. But it was at this time, and maybe Patrice, you can start by telling us more about how drawing really was so important to you at that time, how important this workshop was for you then, how it changed your life, and how your approach to drawing still is today.
Thank you, Iria. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Heidi, for hosting us. An amazing, gorgeous presentation. Thank you, Iria, for this meaningful start. And as you said, like coming back to a place where, in a way, in a refugee camp, like we had a similar place, like kids here. No, I'm joking. But actually, it was actually the first time after 2 years of being refugee here and there that Angelo, how they all call Giacomo Poli, came with a program to make us draw and give us colors and paper. And because we didn't have the same language, we ended up using the drawing, and it was his choice to let us express what we just saw. And the drawing for me, as you said, Iria, like I tell many times that was probably always something that I felt more comfortable than talking. I felt more comfortable in a way drawing. So it was kind of a very good match to have this program. I was happy as a kid ever. And we choose this place here because, as you said before, like this was in '99. I was 13. I'm still same, but but it was a moment where through drawing I felt a sense of connection and joy, and a space to express and share both my imagination, but also it was strange because like when you're at school or when you draw at home, you do it for passion, and you don't know, you just love it, you know, and you draw it, and I was always in love with birds and chickens, and like that was my. But what you see here in the other side is like in the camp, I was asked to also draw what I witnessed, and that was the first time in my life that I could talk to a wider amount of people that were strangers to me. And as we might imagine in the war, anyone that represents a stranger actually is a threat and you are scared of. So having a person that actually it's not of your community, of your family, but actually offers you the space, I feel it was such a special and magical moment, you know, and maybe in a way it feels kind of, you that choose to be here, we thought kind of that a part of this picture we wanted to share a video of the context. If it works. But yeah.
13-årig pojke från Drenica.
Maybe you can let the sound, I don't know, someone Swedish might understand. It was some Swedish TV. But actually, like,
Is the sound not working for a reason, or?
no, maybe it's fine like this.
But basically, you are talking to a TV reporter, right? That's coming to the camp about
Yeah.
your drawings, no?
Yeah.
Displaying to him what you're doing.
Yeah, and we just left, you know, I come from a very small village with kind of peaceful landscape, and this was and it was strange because like, you know, like later when I found these footages way after
Barnen
because
varit vittnen till samma terror.
Shumë raste na ka ra kur ata kanë sulmuna, I kena pas 5 kilometra larg edhe kur kanë sulmuna kemi ik shumë raste kur na kanë ardhur për shembull 1 kilometër kena pa njerëz të plagosur, kena fiksu shumë.
maybe
Kemi kanë
it's
shumë
good.
vizhgra fëmijë edhe ato bishin granata 50 metra,
good.
gjushin nga të neve, nga të shtëpisë.
Here?
Yeah.
But you always told me, I mean, how you used to draw, on the one hand, pictures that depicted more kind of documentary way, scenes of horror you have experienced or witnessed, and then on the other hand, drawing things that were somehow more in your imagination or more fantastical kind of creatures. Can you explain that duality a bit?
Yeah,
That somehow it's
actually,
at the
even
core.
in this, there is a moment where I have another image under, and the journalist said to me like, "What is that?" And I said like, "Actually, this is a parrot. This is I draw also the parrots because this is what makes me feel very good." So, and actually, I love that in the reportage he put that sequence too, because I always believed that even in the war, like in this context where it's kind of really extreme in many levels, and you lose a sense of identity and home, I think like we keep a connection to our dreams, and maybe they become even stronger if you find a way to kind of express it, you know. And for me it was like important because like we are seeing now a display that happened of the same drawings, but re-elaborated in occasion of my solo show at the Tate, which actually that video and these drawings, I could go back and look at them only 20 years after. In a way, for many years, I went to Italy. I started studying in Milan in Fine Arts Academy, and it was my first time I had access to Venice Biennial, Turin, Arte Povera, Italian art history, Europe. So like, I think for a normal sense of like wanting to have something different and new, I was definitely not interested to go back and see what I draw in the camp. Although I never left my like kind of passion and love for birds. So,
But it's fair to say, I mean, now rememorating these moments in the camp, it was actually one of those psychologists, right, that then eventually helped you and support you in incredible ways. So you were able to go to Italy, enroll in the Accademia di Brera in Milan, study fine arts, and then once you graduated, you moved to Berlin. The next one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yeah.
And then you started, you're still working there today in your studio.
Yeah.
And it was there that you started to, to develop works, create works of art. And we're always coming back to, to your childhood, to your experiences, to your ideas of homeland. But then it was, as you're saying, only 20 years after that you get able to go back to those drawings from that time, no?
Yeah, I think it's beautiful because the Angelo who I met in the camp, like the same person that actually kept the drawings. By then, like in '99, I remained in the camp. He left after 2 weeks of this program of making us draw. And I connected extremely to him. And so he left me the email and I kept writing to him anytime I could. The moment I went to high school, every new painting I would do, every new drawing I would do. So like, I didn't know where he ended up, but we kind of kept writing letters to each other. Angelo has a wife and a daughter, Marina and Fede, and like, when I was 17, they decided that if I would like to go in Italy, they would host me in their home. And so I was obviously very happy to have a chance to go and study, but also to, I don't know, like have new things and leave Kosovo. Like maybe we can say that until 1st of January last year, Kosovo was the most isolated country in Europe. Geographically is European, connected to Europe like 2 hours from Berlin in an air flight. But no one could leave because we didn't have visas. So as, of course, traveling and seeing new things in that age was like one of my desires. So I ended up in Italy. And to make short,
Italy basically also access, as you were saying earlier, to Italian art, which had such an important impact on your life and work. You can see a lot of traces that bring us back to Arte Povera and in pieces, the key works that you've made. Should we just jump into this? Or
yeah. I mean, what I wanted to say, I mean, this idea of amplifying in size and working with fragments and memory and trying to get a sense of story and storytelling, like going back to Angelo, because he became an important person, like my second family, helped me to actually go back and see these drawings. And I found, and what was interesting, I knew that Angelo worked with psychodrama. And in psychodrama, you react some scenes that you want to understand better. So my idea was, when I saw these drawings, I was like, Angelo, we cannot, can we use the drawings as characters and make, react story? Because we know, like several things I remember from '99, but many things changed and their relevance changed and what I want to understand, and the questions became different. So Angelo actually found it very funny to treat the characters, the birds, the soldiers, the house, the beautiful house, like landscapes, as a way to retell stories. And so I started to cut out, not the real drawings, but a reproduction. And so all this come from these A4 drawings that I did from him. And here is, in a way, an immersive landscape where one side of them is a drawing that I did in '99 and figurative, and the other side is a monochrome color. And so more you go in the depth, this is kind of 20 meters long, like more you go, the story unfolds to the other side. So you see the coexistence both of reality and imagination in the same space.
Actually, it's funny because you never told me that, and now I understand better, actually, 3 years later, 3 years later, that this fascination of yours, and also of Alvaro, by the way, your partner and with whom you collaborate so often, who's also here joining us tonight. This idea of reenactment, rehearsal, repetition, restaging, and that's somehow for you to create these basically stages, right? These kind of large scale scenarios, no? Which bring us. Can I move now to this?
Yeah, this
Yeah?
was
Okay.
another project I did related to actually the city from where Alvaro comes from. We are partners in life since now, and like we both are artists, and I received this invitation to do a show in Reina Sofia, which is this beautiful palace, crystal palace, and it was a time where we decided to marry, or so. And actually, this is a staging and a place that we dreamt to celebrate and marry, and we kind of thought to reinvent a whole ritual of how we would transform this palace in a place where we were inventing a whole way of how we would celebrate the marriage, and in the same time, what was a decoration for a marriage, which is the flowers, which is a joint work we did with Alvaro, would remain then as an artwork later. Also, it was a good way to resolve how to not buy incredible amount of flowers, but just bigger and less. So it was a, you know, it was just like when you marry, you try to make it economical, but celebrate also. No, I'm joking, but like actually, these flowers, in a way, is each of them, the cherry flower and forsythia and lily, come from our 10 years when we married, like it was 10 years relationship. And we try to remember when we give to each other those flowers. Or, for example, the palm tree flower is when Alvaro gave the seeds to my mom. She's in love with exotic garden who never grows because we live in Kosovo and it's like the winter is always -30. So these palms, but like she keep dreaming that these palms or other and it was also in time where we had very big difficulties actually to be accepted and also celebrate and just have a normal sharing of our life actually with our families. And this context is also in Spain. What made for us important and relevant is that Spain would not accept Kosovo and recognize Kosovo as a country. And I couldn't go with my passport to Spain when I wanted to visit Alvaro. So we faked once. I don't know how even we entered through EasyJet, but we had to kind of try, and it went through. EasyJet, they didn't check. They checked, like, I think, like, actually, I have a trick how I remember now. I printed so many flights before, and so the check person was so tired to check what it was the right ticket that didn't check my passport. And actually, it worked. You remember, that was the thing. so then to marry.
Love will always persevere.
Yeah.
Love will always
Yes.
persevere.
Anyway, and this, yeah. So.
But then also, Spain was a country for you that represented, you know, liberation of LGBTQ rights, and that somehow was welcoming also to you in other ways.
At the same time, our love in Spain is accepted and celebrated, and like although with hard past, like it's one of the most progressive actually countries on the human rights, and in this case of LGBTQI community rights. So it was to mix these possibilities and impossibilities, and also because simply really like it was so hard to imagine like our brothers and sisters would do, like to just marry in a places you would maybe think, that we, I think, like wanted to transform another almost like utopian place where it's kind of this dream place kind of worked, because even with difficulty, like I think it was like we did this with this intention of sharing and bringing something to a show that is also personal, but when you amplify in these dimensions, like it becomes also something for others that they can take it and just live it in their way.
And that relates so much with Abetare in the Roof. I mean, this idea of making an ambitious space, public work that somehow invites audiences beyond you and your immediate private circle. I mean, this is a very intentional path somehow, or strand in your work of creating this sort of public artworks that in which you finally feel the confidence of sharing and inviting others to meet you and just to experience with you different of feelings or thoughts. Contrary to, this is also a beautiful project that you did together more recently in Venice, in which this installation in the chapel, what's the name of the chapel?
It's an ocean space.
Ocean
for
Space,
TBA
exactly.
21, and the project is called Lunar Ensemble for Uprising Seas. It's a collaborative project of last year. We will present this in 2 weeks in Barcelona, whoever want to come. It's an installation that becomes also a performative 1 hour protest through celebration and joy of these creatures that are both sculptural but also instruments. So they're all musical instruments and become kind of an orchestra to be performed.
Yeah. And basically these 3 projects we just ran through quickly summarize so much one important aspect of your work, right? In this huge, again, I repeat myself, environments in which you somehow go public. But that also goes parallel to other sort of another concept, which is architecture as shelter. And that's something that also is included in the roof, by the way. We have one of the big images up there is a house, is a home that symbolizes the idea of shelter, of protection. And you can talk more about that, Petrit. But basically just go through also previous works of yours that symbolize this idea of what can you build something that is a safe space for you, for preserving your intimacy, preserving your freedom, preserving a sense of familiarity, right?
Yes, this is more a shelter for chickens. And I would totally go in and sleep with them, but like it's actually a blue Klein color inside the space shuttle, and I thought as they cannot fly, whenever they enter they will feel kind of able to be in the space. So this infinity of blue inside, and it's built with the actually leftovers of the house we rebuilt after the war. So the wood is, and it's done not by me, I would never be so good, it's done by my family and a neighbor, which is wood, you know, like master. So like, I sent them a drawing, I was doing a solo show at the Kertlude, this was in 2009, and they sent me pictures of this.
And then another very important building in your life, which is your home, your family house in Runic, which was destroyed and burned down. When you got the opportunity to work for, in the context of the Berlin Biennale, you asked the organizers if you could use the money and the commission to actually rebuild that house in Kosovo. Can you tell us more about that and this project, how you also brought that to Berlin, to that context?
I just have a question. Are you Omar? You are Marie. Ciao, can I give you? Because I just saw, how are you? I saw your beautiful spider. Yeah. Oh. Welcome. Are you having okay time? Good time? Yeah? Okay. Tell us if you are boring, okay?
You can borrow the costume if you want.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
You know, I just came. You were not here, but I came with this. I put like this. I will do it later for you. Okay. Yeah. No, this is the family house, and in a way, like we chose some of the projects that, as you said, Iria, are in a way architecture or spaces as a shelter for storytelling, or actually doing something that both come from a reality, but also with a dream to change or be part of a transformation, both in my life, but also to people in my family. And when I started to work, something that I was doing before alone was drawing and painting. But then when I started to be interested in sculptural shapes, I always thought that sculpture brought with itself also a relation and collaboration and a chance to, yeah, like make a moment of transformation. So when I was invited to Berlin Biennial, I was 24, kind of fairly broke in Berlin, with kind of big dreams, but like, you know, like, yeah, when they told me the budget, I was like, oh my God, like, makes sense. Doesn't make sense to make a sculpture. if I brought this in Kosovo, would make a house, you know, like, and I knew how big dream my family had to migrate to Pristina. And so actually, in the same time, as I was actually helping my family to rebuild the house after the war, when I learned at the school, this, you know, the process of casting sculpture, that you make a shape and you mold the cement or whatever you are doing, then I was thinking like there is a sense of sculptural sense of it. And then I didn't have the solution, but then my idea was to make the house in Kosovo, which I didn't share images or anything, but like what I was interested that almost a ghost and a sense of it came to Berlin, obviously with the chickens in the museum, but actually they would bring this like absence of it, because when you go under, you see these hollow spaces, and we promised each other to don't go deeper in every project.
I'm just thinking about that. We were so lucky that you didn't bring chickens to the Met, actually. You know.
Did I have a chance?
You didn't even. You
I
never
tried,
suggested
of
it.
course.
So
We didn't tell you, but actually there is a section of a new department dedicated to chickens. In the Met, yeah. But it's a secret, no. Yeah. No, it's here. I mean, to maybe what we selected as a second.
No, sorry, this is a bit.
Not wanting to go.
This is another shelter of sorts, which is very interesting because, again, going back to Arte Povera and this idea of sense of land, sense of homeland, you always keep referencing, you know, and in fact, this shelter that you built in Venice, you made it with branches also making their way from your hometown in Runic again. Your brother helped you collect them, and you built that.
Yeah.
Which was the first time, actually, that Kosovo had a pavilion in Venice, in the Venice Biennale.
It's crazy. It was very surreal to see the boats in Venice that were bringing branches from Kosovo, like passing by. And we, like, you know, like it was amazing process. But, you know, like, I think, as you said, like, together with the idea of shelter and protection, which was what I really felt in that moment in my life. You know, I was representing Kosovo, but as a queer, gay person, like, I couldn't actually share this publicly. Or so many things, and I always think, when I'm put it in a commission or in a moment to tell something, I would at least, you know, maybe I was in that moment of life that actually I would have loved to tell it. And so it was a lot of struggle to understand how to find a balance and what actually I can share, so you build a space for a conversation. So actually, as I couldn't publicly share who I was, we decided with Alvaro to loan our 2 canary birds that were living in our apartment in Berlin. It was our first years living together. And this space, which is actually also floating, when you would enter in this kind of cave, you would see 2 holes for seeing inside. And then when you see inside, it was kind of an upside down world where these 2 canary birds you would kind of have a chance to encounter. So in a way, they were the kind of a secret ambassadors. And I loved how in Kosovo this was, in a way, because birds everywhere, in a way, like they were saying, like the birds of freedom, but not of me and Alvaro, but also of Kosovo, and actually that parallel thing of search for new identity and freedom have been kind of accompanying me so much until today. Maybe we can share a surreal moment. We just welcomed Madam President Vjosa Osmani from the Republic of Kosovo. We just spent an hour with her in the rooftop, and it's incredible because, like, I realized that my experience of the war or later on, and the journey, she even passed through Runic, which is this small town I would never imagine, like, and had so many things. And so we started to talk a lot about something that we are actually looking in many directions. For her, is in political, diplomatic level, and I'm interested in others. Maybe, yeah.
You were saying about this idea of freedom. And then, actually, Najo mentioned the president of Kosovo. Let's go into, Petrit, if you allow me to go to another important aspect of your work, which is, as you say, you know, the idea of social space, public sphere. You've been also many times working with actual buildings, right, in Kosovo. I can show you a few of them as sites that embody this idea of, you know, of collective memory, of sorts of the fragility of cultural heritage in a country that, again, is not still recognized in many countries, but also, for example, UNESCO doesn't recognize Kosovo, right, as a nation that needs or requires preservation of its own kind of cultural legacy. And you've dealt with that issue in a number of occasions. This is the House of Culture in Runik. And it's a project that actually now you are going back to it, but let's just show how you reactivated that building, trying to bring back the memories of how that building was used before the war, no?
Yeah, I think this was one of the projects related also to the image before, a solo show I had in New Museum in 2017, which actually brought a whole cultural heritage related to Neolithics, which was also nothing left in the town. And I found this and I reproduced artifacts from images or storytellings, and they all became migratory birds. In the House of Culture, I realized, like, as a step in my life, I wanted to understand more what was happening outside of the family and how our actually relations and identity is affected by a historical and geographical context we are. It's very interesting because Kosovo is a small town, but small country. But as a why we know it, it was because NATO intervened in '99. And so it became a global story because from the Second World War, there was no intervention as such in aim of freedom or protecting another population that has no representation. And for us, like, you know, like, in a way, we went through this, yeah, like a loss, and this also embodied cultural heritage loss. And for example, what was theater or library became a ruin. I grew up in this town where there were stories of this theater and red curtains. My mom, my father would have theater plays, and I didn't live that because it was all censored. And so I was dreaming to bring for one day back the theater, and we did this performance.
And then another important building, a very actually iconic building, is the Hotel Pristina in the capital of Kosovo, which for many, many years was the most important hotel. In fact, it was a 5-star hotel and has a long history. And also very recently, Petrit has made a project up there also in the roof. Can you tell us more?
Oh, yeah. So from Runik, which is 5,000 inhabitants, like, the next project was in the context of Manifesta. Was this in 2021, 2, yeah. Where actually, parallelly to this, I was invited by the Met to think about the new commission. And so it was very interesting because I found this 5 stars. You see the hotel there, it had the 5 stars. But when I noticed, like, that they cutted the stars and they were put on top of the roof. So if you would see it from up, it was kind of a constellation, kind of poetic, because thinking that that was the fall of Yugoslavia and was the most glamorous hotel. Even Tito, they say he would come to Kosovo, he would sleep in that hotel. It still is the room you can visit. But then it's completely decaying. And I was fascinated to bring back the stars. And by law, you cannot bring back the 5 stars because it's not anymore. So the idea was to make them as a constellation and add more, so it became kind of a sky. And I did an open letter to all citizens of Pristina, actually inspired by a story of a very young girl, a text that she wrote for the school. The title was, "When the sun goes away, I will paint the sky." No, when the sun goes away, I paint the sky. No, she wrote, "I paint the sky." So I phoned her, now she was 24, and I wanted to transform the Grand Hotel Pristina in a sentence in Albanian, where if you are in a city, you would have to go around it to read. But if you go around, it would, I just changed from I to we, And it was a call for, you know, like, yeah, when the sun goes away, we paint the sky. So
It's very beautiful. And one star now is actually hanging, no, from
Yeah.
your gallery in downtown in Chelsea.
Yes.
So you want to see it. And then to another building, very important building for you, which is your school, right? In your hometown. And this is basically the project that originated the roof commission. Let's talk about Abetare. Now finally made
we
it.
come to Abetare.
To the cut to the chase, yeah, and we did that. And this is a building that survived the war, actually, in your town. One of the very few public buildings that survived the war. But yet, when you came back to visit your family recently, in 2012, right, you discovered that the school was going to be demolished, and you were shocked by that news because it meant so much for the town. So you went to see it, and you were at the time of its demolition, and you found these kids vandalizing the remainings of the furniture in the classrooms. And one of the kids pointed you to this fabulous discovery, which was this pile of desks. And tell us more.
Yeah, no, that was the encounter. In a way, this project came to me. As you said, Iria, like I was just visiting my family for vacations, and I realized that one of the few landmarks, architectural landmarks that survived and would connect to before the war was being demolished. And, you know, the kids in the other corner, you don't see it here, but like they were literally, you know, with these big machines throwing in the corner and starting to turn down. And then some of kids, you know, in a small village, everyone knows each other. So some of kids knew me. They came towards me, and they grabbed me. I loved it because I was so nostalgic before I met them. And then I just realized they were having fun. Like, I didn't know how. So they invite me. They say, like, let's go to the school just last hours before we see. So I didn't go to the school since a long time. So I was like, let's go. And so I was filming, and when we entered, we would go through the director's office, and they would paint. Basically, they would do anything you dream and you can never dream and dare to think you can do at school. So it was really crazy. And then after, like surreal. And we went out because they were really like turning down the school. So I was like, let's go out, guys. And so like we went out, and then it was a pile of desks. And one of the kids pointed me that I should check this desk because there is everything in them. And to tell you the truth, I didn't realize so much that sentence as today. I filmed this, I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to save these desks. And I called my family, like we kind of kept 27 or something. I wanted to keep a school, a classroom, because those desks were from 70s. So they had these generations, they were before me, I was there only in the 90s, and after me. And so when I checked that, and when I saw that what the kid told me, I thought he was right, so.
And that somehow, after some thought, right, and you came with this project, which is titled Abetare. Abetare means ABC book in Albanian, and that's a very important book for you. It's a learning book in schools, and this is the page that shows the P as in Petritid.
Yeah, that's why I thought this was dedicated to me, because I had chickens, I had just a hill and a house, and I thought every kid, I don't know, like, had a page in ABC book, like, obviously. So the P stand for Petrit, like, made logic, still makes sense.
So this is the image of the desk as you found them, and then this is the images of those surfaces that, you know, are like archaeological layers, layers over layers.
Yeah, and
of expressions, I mean, from anonymous people you don't know. And what was your, I mean, how did you process all of this information from people you actually never get to meet? What did inspire you in the first place from this encounter with this imagery?
So, it's Hiomari, no? Do you make drawings in the desks or just in the paper? Do you make some drawings in the desks? No? Okay, you will see. You will. And Omar, have you seen the small mouse in the corner? No. Actually, like, I guess, but also you have seen the commission upstairs, no? Or still to, you have seen, okay. So actually, like, how to say, it was kind of a long process of working, but from encountering Runic, that maybe you remember from Up, to the Heart, to the Batman, these are initials for Yugoslavia, and Pokemon, Messi. What I was touched is this extremely local stories, Albanian names, hearts, you know, like universal themes, very simple, to the point. I was like, how can they be so good? You know, like a heart that is like not linear, but you know, it symbolizes to me something. And at the same time, they were very funny and very light, full of humor, but also very serious. Like they were traced of history and symbols and religion and like tensions. And in a way, they became territory symbols. Like, and I thought as a way, for a long time, how this could become a way to do an artwork with them, like how they become something, because I thought that small world, intimate, lost in the desks, would have been amazing to take it more serious and to reflect on it. And that was the beginning. Like, I was very fascinated of how much content and kind of a source for possible stories was.
And that's how we came to the, let me go back, to the roof installation.
Maybe like.
So this is kind
Voila.
of the result. So I'm processing, distilling. First of all, let's talk about how you made a huge compilation, an inventory of kind of sorts, and that then you also went to other schools, right? You wanted to expand your research in other schools, in other countries that were once part of Yugoslavia, and you went on to Croatia and Macedonia and Montenegro, and you made a huge, huge archive of many different drawings, and then you did this cataloging, right? And you basically selected a few of them, which basically made it to the roof as you see them here. And basically your technique or your strategy was, let's enlarge them in three-dimensional sculptures made with metal, right? First with bronze, but then the large sculptures are actually made with steel to be more sturdy and resilient.
Stainless,
And somehow those drawings become, as you were saying, a way for you to create a storytelling and amplify also voices so as to cover the memories or the creativity and imagination of many children across the Balkans. And you created this kind of scenario or scenography in which you are summoning those anonymous children, but at the same time you're talking about yourself. So how was that balance for you? You know, you're talking about your own personal story, but also about children you don't know. Actually, a huge amount of children you don't know where they are, who they are. You were conscious of that all along.
I mean, I think what I was interested also is the context where these drawings come. You know, like the title Abetare, just to go back, is not only the page of Petrit, but actually it's ABC book where we learned the alphabet. And so this comes from the school, an educational system, which later on I understood that is questionable. The way how we learned about history, the way how we learned about life, this transformed, and it's important that we re-question this, you know. And especially Abetare's ABC book in the 90s was also prohibited to reproduce, to reprint. Schools were with no reforms. There were parallel system of teaching. And so it was very, you know, the school became a way of resisting and the language a way of seeing identity in home. In a way, what these drawings are is in all that struggle of school and institution, you would find a moment to carve and take your moment as a student, and like maybe you were bored and I don't know, like, and you write and you make a spider. And I don't know if it's a sun or a spider and a flower on a house, but like what I thought is like that was so precious because we know the mainstream history and they are always more ways to see, but is super polarized, and for us is such a difficult, still political context. And those drawings bring this moment of, I don't know, like something different that was there parallelly, actually listening and witnessing all these histories, but was there parallelly. And as an artist, like what I'm trying to and narrate is new stories that are possible still to tell and expand from what we know already. And so this is, you know, as the other desks, as you said, Iria, like this, for example, is a desk from Skopje, and is where the spider come from. There were other desks, but someone is saying we are out of time. No?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to come here, like what I thought, like that as a context of new of new commission here, you know, the Metropolitan Museum is an encyclopedic context with fragments from all over the world that you make a sense and you tell the new stories. And this is fragments from all over region of Balkans that come here for a new story in a way.
And also important to point out is how you encounter, I mean, one thing that you really wanted to accomplish is this idea of creating a sort of anti-monument, a public work that somehow becomes decentralized, fragmented, that is not only representing one particular vision, but many, many voices. It's kind of orchestra of voices. And then also how interesting it is the fact that you keep this, masterfully, I would say, this equilibrium between images, again, as you said, that are universally recognizable, that are symbols that everybody has seen or even draw themselves. There are pop culture references like Batman here. There are, a spider trying to escape the roof, a flower, but then also reference to Messi, the most important, the most famous soccer player today. But then also there are many references that only speak to the context of Kosovo, right? That are very specific to the story, to the culture of where you come from. And that's something that we always discuss about, I really want to bring that specific, the specificity, of what I have there, what I remember from that place here, and make it available and accessible to the visitors that many of them actually might not know where Kosovo is. No? And this is very inviting. This is, for example, the acronym KFOR, which if a kid from a fellow friend would immediately recognize, basically stands for Kosovo Forces, which is a peace forces that kept stability in the region. But of course, a visitor from New York might not really understand. And then the corner for love, which of course hearts and sexual references are understood by anyone, no? So in a way, you are very playful. This is the one I like the most. I mean, this, as you know, it's a very, generic representation of a figure of a.
In Albanian says.
Of a man says, opening up the arms, and in Albanian you read.
I love you that much, and
much.
It has the arms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a way, and here, reference to here, what is here? Is New York here? Is Kosovo here? Is your mind here? So that's, it's something that you're conscious about, right? This playfulness and joking, but and also getting serious and deep into, important things that really matter to you, about your country, but also about freedom in general, or fights for freedom,
And I really hope this is just like, as you said before, like the idea of that you see through this drawing still and sculptures, it was an intention that I was so curious to try, and I'm so grateful we worked very long together to bring this project in this way, because, it was a challenging, like if you make normally a sculpture, you want a volume to be in the middle and take a space. And we were like, what it means, how to confront this history and this place and this context of the museum, but also the skyline and the park and the nature and the sky, like how to, and I find it like that they have this queer aspect of being there, but also not being there, like so they become kind of a ghost or just the idea of a shadow, that you kind of have a sense of a space. And I hope this allows also actually your stories to continue in your mind and imagination and like just kind of complete them, because I don't think this is a complete story in a way. And that's where maybe we should open up to your questions.
Perfect.
And
I couldn't
thank
say
you
it better.
for
I was
your
gonna say-
patience. No?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So we have time for 1 or 2 questions. If you have any, please raise your hand.
Ask you to use the microphone because we are recording, so we would love to get your voice in the recording. So if you raise your hand, I have a microphone for you.
Over there at the back.
And by the way, we have a mouse there in a corner that left the rooftop, and we found it here today. It's crazy.
It's amazing.
The installing team, we have to bring it back.
So
Please, the question. Yeah.
thank you for bringing this. It's so beautiful. It brings back a lot of memories. My question is actually, has anybody come forward and recognized their beautiful artwork from childhood and said thank you or burst into tears? It's making me cry, and I was never in Kosovo, but just curious.
Actually, I'm also waiting for that moment. Either we are, I don't know, yeah, they haven't seen or something, but like I would love to encounter that moment, because actually the spider, for example, is still in Macedonia and the desk is still there, so it would be magical. But you know, things come when you don't expect, so very open for that. Yeah. No, I'm just thinking, imagine if they want the spider back to their home, and I would be like, yeah, let's do it.
Okay, then. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.